Hey guys, tonight we slip off your modern blankets and unroll the dusty linen wraps of a world where a handful of clever, sharp-tongued women snatched crowns from marble-fisted men. You're standing at the mouth of the Nile Delta, warm wind at your cheeks, the distant scent of lotus blossoms drifting past your nose. You squint toward Alexandria's Lighthouse 1, flickering torch atop a stone colossus, guiding ships stuffed with scrolls, spices, and scandal. Here's the twist: if you were born back then, you probably wouldn't survive the first intrigue. Sand fleas, court gossip, sibling assassin stake, your pick. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing who's drifting off where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tug your cloak tighter against the Nile's damp breeze as you peer into Egypt's golden age of cross-cultural chaos. It's the Hellenistic world where Greek generals carved Alexander's broken empire into greedy chunks, each desperate to slap their face on a coin and build a dynasty that might, just might, outlive their own backstabbing children. Here, in this shifting mosaic of dusty kingdoms, a handful of women spot a crown sitting slightly askew. And unlike their timid marble sisters in Athens, these queens pick it up, sometimes gently, more often with a dagger tucked in their sleeve. Take one of the earliest Arsinoe too, but wait, you're getting ahead of yourself. Before Arsinoe sharpens her claws, you need to understand how these Macedonian women ended up worshipped like Egyptian gods. The Ptolemies, descendants of Ptolemy the First, Soter-Laxander's boyhood friend turned opportunistic pharaoh, took the throne of Egypt after Alex dropped dead in Babylon. Egypt, battered by Persian rule for centuries, mostly shrugged and said, "Sure, Greeks, why not just keep the irrigation working?" But this new Greek ruling class quickly figured out, if you want the people's loyalty, slap on a few crocodile amulets and call yourself pharaoh. And if you're going to pretend to be a pharaoh, better invite your wives and sisters to play goddess, too. Historians still argue whether the Ptolemaic queens really believed they were living deities or if it was just clever branding. Either way, you stand now in Alexandria's royal district, marbled colonnades humming with gossip because the first Ptolemaic queens knew how to wield a cult as deftly as a scepter. Picture a grand ceremony at the temple of Isis: gold incense burners, veiled priestesses, crowds pressing close to glimpse a queen clad in linen so sheer it makes your modern hoodie look like chainmail. These queens didn't hide in the background. They paraded, spoke, minted coins with their profiles. Egyptian tradition merged with Greek ego to birth a string of queens who'd make any HBO showrunner weep with envy. Of course, not every Egyptian loved their new Greek rulers. There were whispers: these foreigners didn't speak true Egyptian, didn't respect old customs enough, taxed the grain boats too harshly. But the royal women, they leaned hard into Egyptian iconography, appearing beside Horus and Isis, commissioning temples deep in the deserts, leaving little granite signatures. So future wanderers like you could stand here, mouth dry, wondering how they managed it. Quirky fact: one Ptolemaic queen, legend says, made a daily beauty paste from crushed pearls dissolved in vinegar, probably more symbolic than effective. Unless you count bragging rights as skincare, You can almost feel the heat shimmer off the limestone walls as these women sisters' wives, sometimes both remember. This is the Ptolemies we're talking about. Plot, marry, and unmarry each other. In an endless game of thrones, by the Nile Arsinoe, too, is waiting in the wings, sharper than her brothers, charismatic enough to sway armies. But first, you glance behind her at the stage she steps onto, a kingdom newly Greek yet anciently Egyptian, hungry for spectacle and wary of foreign crowns. Look around this marble and mud-brick city. Traders hawk olive oil and papyrus by the dock. Scholars argue in shady courtyards. Spies lurk behind every fluted column. And somewhere in this swirl, a young princess watches her father's crown slide crooked already, planning how to straighten it on her own brow. You run your fingertips along a temple wall, tracing faded hieroglyphs where a goddess wears a crown, suspiciously similar to a Macedonian diadem. Maybe it's no accident. Maybe these queens knew that old symbols could cloak new ambition. Maybe they needed to become divine, because their mortal brothers were just too mortal, fallible, murderous, easily poisoned. So here you stand, at the dawn of a dynasty of women who will rewrite power plays in silk and gold. You're not quite in the shadow of the pyramids anymore. You're drifting into candlelit libraries, private gardens, whispered plots in marble baths, and you're just getting started. The crown is on the floor, the lotus blossoms are blooming, and a queen's footsteps echo down a corridor lined with polished obsidian. Remember the pearl vinegar? Beauty trick. Maybe it worked. Maybe it didn't. Historians still argue whether she drank it to impress guests or just to show she could afford to swallow half a kingdom's worth of jewelry. You shift your weight in the sand. The Nile laps at the banks behind you. Somewhere ahead, a queen slips a dagger under her embroidered belt. You're about to follow. You drift deeper into the labyrinth of Alexandria's royal district. Cool marble floors beneath your sandals, the warm breath of the sea drifting through half-draped courtyards. You pass statues with chipped noses, stone ancestors staring down at you with the same blank authority that once watched over the very first Ptolemies who dared to crown themselves pharaohs. And here, among these echoing halls, the family's favorite pastime is not feasting or poetry, though they do plenty of that too, but intrigue. Intrigue so thick you'd need a bronze sickle to cut through it. This is where you find yourself now, slipping along polished colonnades where whispers cling to every pillar. You duck your head beneath an arched doorway and glimpse the core of it all, the Ptolemaic court. Picture it a swirl of Greeks, Egyptians, mercenaries from half the known world, foreign ambassadors, Macedonian generals, eunuchs, astrologers, poets, and somewhere in this swirl of sandalwood incense and rose petals, the queens weave their nets. At the center sits a family tree more tangled than the reeds at the Nile's edge. Brothers marry sisters, uncles marry nieces. Sometimes nieces marry their brothers too, yes. Your modern stomach might churn, but for the Ptolemies, pure royal blood was worth every awkward wedding feast. Tonight you stand behind a marble column, listening to the gentle hum of lyres, the clink of wine cup sand, the sharp scrape of envy. Cleopatra I is here, mother to future kings. Cleopatra too lounges on a gilded couch, eyes half closed but ears sharp as papyrus knives. Arsinoe II's ghost is almost visible in the shadows, watching. learning. You imagine a guard leaning on his spear, whispering to a friend, if these people spent half as much time ruling as they do marrying each other, Egypt would own Rome by now. Mainstream fact. The Ptolemaic dynasty held Egypt for nearly 300 years, one of the longest-lasting pieces of Alexander's splintered empire. Their secret, family unity, though unity, usually meant poisonings and betrayals spiced with silk gowns and golden crowns. You creep closer to Cleopatra too now. Her father, Ptolemy VI, is long gone. Some say poison, some say a convenient fall. Cleopatra too is no mere ornament. She's a queen who will raise armies, order executions, and stand barefoot in temple courtyards, demanding the gods take her side. But right now, she's just a sister wife, her smile as soft as the figs on her table. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra ruled because she was brilliant or simply because every brother and husband who opposed her ended up mysteriously dead. Probably both, if we're honest. Nearby, a servant boy scatters rose petals on the floor, a delicate cover for footsteps sneaking through these marble halls at midnight. The royal family loves feasts that sprawl into dawn, but you notice the real business happens in hushed side chambers. Here, a sister suggests her brother's crown looks heavy. There, a wife suggests a general's loyalty is wavering. All behind fans of peacock feathers, faces carefully blank, quirky tidbit. The Ptolemies once tried to invent a living deity, Serapis, a mashup god, to unify Greek and Egyptian subjects. Picture a divine mascot in a bull's crown and Roman toga, sculpted, so everyone could say, "Look, he's ours." It mostly works. Serapis temples popped up all over the Mediterranean. U trail. Cleopatra too through a silk-draped corridor into a smaller chamber, where a marble table gleams with oil lamps. A map of the Nile sprawls across its surface, marked with tiny figurines, armies, grain barges, ships. She bends low, her bracelets clicking, murmuring to an advisor whose eyes dart toward a doorway you shouldn't be standing in. You duck back, just in time. No need for a real guard to spot your modern sneakers here. Through the crack you hear talk of uprisings in Thebes, grain shortages in Upper Egypt, trouble with a brother's wandering loyalty. Cleopatra II's voice stays calm, like the steady lap of river water at night. But beneath that calm, you sense a tempest gathering. When dawn breaks, she smiles at her brother husband at the public banquet. She feeds him sweet figs and fine wine, and he'll toast her beauty in front of ambassadors. But when the moon returns, the guards may find that same brother locked or worse. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra II's reign was one of stability or ceaseless civil war. The truth, as you can feel from your hidden alcove, is both. The Ptolemaic dynasty was a tightrope walk strung over a Nile full of crocodiles, sometimes literal ones, sometimes human. You lean closer as the scent of frankincense curls around your nose. Cleopatra too lifts a tiny onyx box inside, a paste of exotic herbs, or maybe something far more sinister. A poison to slip into a cup, a healing salve for a trusted conspirator's wounds. In this palace, it could be either. Beyond the chamber, the streets of Alexandria glow under lantern light. Scholars in the great library debate scrolls by flickering flame. Merchants snore on silk cushions, dreaming of tomorrow's profits. And within these walls, queens dream sharper dreams, crowns scepters, the subtle rustle of power shifting from one sister's hand to another's. You pull back, careful not to disturb the shadows. You glimpse the future Cleopatra II's children. Will pick up her battles. Cleopatra III will soon step into the corridor behind you, all sly smiles and whispered promises. The queens of the Ptolemies will keep spinning their family's web long after the brothers and husbands lie quiet beneath marble slabs. And somewhere in that sticky web, a new plan begins to hatch, a plan to wield temples, gossip, marriage, and murder as tools no less powerful than any legion. You slip away from the chamber before Cleopatra II's gaze can catch yours. Out into the moonlit colonnade where rose petals litter the stones, faintly sticky underfoot. The royal intrigues are far from done. If anything, they're just getting comfortable. You breathe deep. Somewhere, a nightingale sings over the palace. Gardens, somewhere else, a whisper turns into a plan that will outlive the night. And you're still here, drifting between marble columns and the hushed heartbeat of history. Don't worry, there's no poison in your cup-only stories tonight. You slip past the rose-scented halls of Cleopatra II's midnight plots and drift forward. Deeper into the palace, where another queen waits, Arsinoe II, older than Cleopatra II by generations, yet sharper in legend than many kings who came after her. The oil lamps flicker along a corridor lined with murals of falcon-headed gods and Greek muses dancing side by side, as if the walls themselves can't decide which civilization they serve tonight. You trace your fingertips along a painted lotus petals cracked by centuries. Somewhere behind these walls, Arsinoe II sharpens her words like a blade. You follow the faint rustle of silk sandals and find her standing beneath a colonnade open to the moon. The Nile glimmers in the distance, a silver snake winding through reeds and secrets. Arsinoe II is no shy princess. She's a daughter of Ptolemy I, the founder, raised in the swirl of Macedonian pride and Egyptian ritual. Married once to King Lysimachus of Thracias, Thrace, cold forests and burly warriors, and far from the sultry breath of the Nile. There, she learned to survive court conspiracies the hard way. Rumor says she even had a hand in eliminating one inconvenient stepson. You lean against a pillar, eavesdropping on whispers no historian can quite confirm. Historians still argue whether she ordered that poison herself or merely watched with approving eyes. When Lysimachus fell in battle, Arsinoe II wasted no time mourning. She grabbed her children, fled back toward Egypt, and set her eyes on something bigger, her own brother, Ptolemy II Philadelphus. If you just raised an eyebrow, you're not alone. Brother-sister marriages were shocking to many Greeks, but played well in Egyptian tradition. Pharaoh and goddess, king and queen, Osiris and Isis reborn in mortal flesh. Arsinoe knew exactly how to drape herself in those ancient myths. She and Ptolemy II married, co-ruled, minted coins with both their faces in size and stare. She wasn't just an ornament at his side. She was coroller in all but name, commanding armies, giving orders to governors, and showing up in public ceremonies like a goddess made flesh. You wander into her royal garden, where rose bushes drip with dew under the moonlight. Here, Arsinoe once received foreign envoys, standing among peacocks and perfumed vines. She'd listen to offers of alliances, grain shipments, trade deals, then lean in close with that half smile and make sure every man left believing he'd made a friend or an enemy? Or both? Mainstream fact. Arsinoe's influence was so strong that after her death, her brother husband deified her officially. Temples rose in her honor, statues carried her face beside Isis, coins continued to bear her profile for decades. People worshipped her alongside God Zan, immortal queen spun from silk and stone. A soft breeze carries the scent of frankincense and crushed myrrh. You peek through a trellis where Arsinoe's advisors hover like moths. They speak in low voices about rival claimants, distant Thracian ties that still need cutting, Macedonian cousins who might sniff a chance to grab Egypt's crown if they sense weakness. Quirky tidbit. Some scrolls hint that Arsinoe kept a personal spy network disguised as temple priestesses, while the men debated taxes and troop movements. Her holy women carried messages through incense clouds and ritual chant secrets drifting like smoke to the queen's private ear. You watch Arsinoe now, lifting a golden goblet to her lips, her eyes locked on a general kneeling at her feet. She thanks him for loyalty, but just hints that his rival might be more loyal still. She's planting doubt like a gardener sowing lotus seeds along the riverbank. One grows into a blossom. The other rots in the mud. Historians still argue whether Arsinoe loved her brother husband, or if he was simply the only man powerful enough to match her ambition. Perhaps both. You step deeper into the garden, your sandals brushing past pomegranate blossoms. A silver basin ripples with water, where moonlight pools stories within stories. In the shadows beyond the trellis, you catch a glimpse of a marble stele dedicated to Arsinoe. Even centuries later, her worship-lingered temples stood in her name not just in Egypt, but as far away as Delos and Cyprus. Pilgrims brought offerings, honey cakes, garlands, whispered prayers that their families might stay united, or broken apart depending on which favor they sought. You circle the pool, listening to the wind carry scraps of old songs praising Arsinoe as sister, mother, goddess, queen. You wonder if she heard those same praises in her lifetime and laughed into her wine, knowing how much she'd earned every whispered syllable. A papyrus rustles at your feet, some servant dropped it decades ago. Maybe a note warning of a Thracian. Rivals approach, useless now, like so many secrets buried beneath the marble floors of this palace. But if you hold it up, you might hear the echo of Arsinoe's voice instructing her guard, her priests, her spies to take care of loose ends. Remember that paste of crushed pearls from earlier. Arsinoe didn't waste her time with such petty tricks. She wielded the real treasures, information, alliances, and the power to declare herself divine. Your eyelids grow heavy, but the moonlit garden hums with tension. You can almost taste the iron temps of ambition in the warm night air. You slip away down a corridor lined with marble busts of kings who all thought they were untouchable until a queen stepped out from the shadows and showed them otherwise. A soft laugh floats behind you. Maybe it's just the wind among the rose bushes. Or maybe it's Arsinoe, too, still watching, still waiting to whisper in the ears of queens yet unborn. You move quietly now, slipping through shadowed halls where the air hums with tension, almost like the palace itself is holding its breath. Ahead, Cleopatra II's world unravels, a kingdom teetering on the edge of civil war and bitter family strife. Imagine the heavy tapestries and the faint smell of jasmine oil, mingling with the sharp metallic scent of bronze weapons tucked behind hidden panels. You're about to witness a queen who doesn't just wear power, she fights tooth and nail to keep it. Cleopatra II, daughter and wife of Ptolemy VI, embodies everything complicated and raw about ruling a dynasty where blood ties are both sacred and deadly. You find her pacing a small chamber, her fingers tapping a carved wooden table, eyes narrowed like a hawk ready to strike. Outside, the city of Alexandria buzzes with rumors, whispers that her own brother and husband plots against her. You catch the faintest sound of distant drums, signaling unrest far upriver in Thebes. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra II sparked the civil wars or was merely the victim of relentless betrayal. But the truth is muddier than the Nile itself. Her reign wasn't just about fancy banquets or temple processions. It was war, blood, strategy, and sometimes desperate negotiation in candlelit rooms, where lives hung by threads thinner than the finest Egyptian linen. Picture her rallying loyal troops, her voice firm but low, weaving promises of land and grain to restless soldiers who have seen too many leaders fall to poison or exile. This queen wasn't content to sit on gold-threaded cushions. She marched armies, demanded loyalty, and struck deals with mercenaries from distant lands. Quirky fact: during one uprising, Cleopatra II reportedly used a fleet of warships adorned with painted eyes on their prows, an ancient Egyptian tactic to intimidate enemies, like giant fish watching from the waves. It worked so well that rival factions abandoned their posts in confusion. Imagine soldiers seeing those painted eyes at dawn and wondering if they were cursed by the gods. You watch as she meets secretly with advisors, beneath an archway carved with hieroglyphs and Greek letter symbols of two worlds she rules but often barely controls. They talk in hushed tones about grain shipments disrupted by rebels and how the Roman Republic's shadow looms larger with every passing season. There's a strange tension in the air. Cleopatra II's strength comes not just from armies or gold, but from a fierce will to survive, to keep her line alive, no matter the cost. You imagine the countless nights she spent staring into flickering oil lamps, weighing which family member to trust, which rival to crush, and when to smile sweetly enough to hide the dagger beneath her sleeve. A faint breeze carries the scent of lotus blossoms from a distant garden. You remember Arseniui's moonlit roses and the garden's silent witness to power plays. The scent mingles with the smoke of incense burning in temples to Isis, the goddess these queens leaned on for divine favor and political cover. Historians still debate how much these queens truly ruled versus acting as figureheads for male generals and Roman patrons. But standing here, listening to the soft clatter of sandals and whispered plans, you know Cleopatra II held her ground in a world that rarely let queens stay standing for long. In this palace, power is a game played in shadows and sunlight, in lavish banquets and secret battles. Cleopatra II's story is a reminder that queens could be warriors in silk, commanders in jewels, and mothers of empires, even if their victories are often whispered rather than shouted. As the sun sets over the Nile, you hear the distant beating of drums again. The city holds its breath. Somewhere, a queen sharpens her resolve, ready for another round in a game where the stakes are crowns, lives, and the very soul of Egypt itself. You glide from the restless nights of Cleopatra II's turbulent reign and find yourself slipping into the calculated world of Cleopatra III, If Cleopatra II was the fiery storm, Cleopatra III is the quiet eye, calm on the surface, but pulling the strings beneath with ruthless precision. Her throne is carved from decades of family bloodshed, and she knows how to keep it by weaving secret alliances that no one quite sees coming. The palace feels different here, less the scent of jasmine and frankincense, more the cold polish of marble corridors echoing with measured footsteps and whispered promises. You find Cleopatra III in a private chamber, surrounded by advisors draped in fine linen, their faces masks of practiced loyalty. She doesn't just smile to charm, she calculates, weighs, decides. She's mother and stepmother to kings, a queen who held real power during an era when Rome's claws were tightening around Egypt's neck, while her predecessors fought sibling wars and civil uprisings. Cleopatra III mastered the art of secret diplomacy, trading favors, promises, and sometimes marriages to keep the Ptolemaic line intact. Mainstream fact: Cleopatra III quarreled with her sons, juggling family loyalty and political necessity like a tightrope walker over a pit of vipers. She was no mere figurehead, but a queen commanding armies and managing foreign policy. During some of the dynasty's most precarious years, you notice a faint hum of conversation about Rome's increasing demands, tribute, troops, and respect. Cleopatra III navigates this with quiet cunning, sending envoys cloaked in subtle threats and flattering gifts. Her eyes, sharp as obsidian, miss nothing. Quirky tidbit: one story tells of Cleopatra III keeping a political guestbook, a scroll listing every foreign dignitary she met, annotated with little notes on who favored her and who posed threats. It was her version of a social media feed. Centuries before hashtags, you watch her lean close to an advisor, whispering plans to pit her sons against each other when convenient, an old Ptolemaic trick to keep the family fractured enough to rule, but united enough to survive. You catch the faintest smirk. Mother knows how to play her sons like chess pieces, not pawns. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra III's reign strengthened the dynasty or hastened its decline. Was she a stabilizing force or a manipulative matriarch whose intrigue poisoned the palace? From where you stand, the answer blurs like the flicker of candlelight on polished marble. A faint scent of myrrh drifts through the chamber, mingling with the rustle of papyrus scrolls. You overhear whispers about secret marriages arranged with neighboring kingdoms, alliances sealed with wine, and veiled threats. Cleopatra III's network extends far beyond Alexandria into Libya, Cyrene, and even the courts of Rome itself. You imagine her standing on the balcony of her palace overlooking the harbor, watching merchant ships unload spices, silks, and Roman coins. She knows the tides of power shift with every ship's arrival, every whispered deal in the market. This queen is as much a trader as a ruler, bartering not just goods but influence and survival. As night deepens, you step back into the cool shadows, carrying the scent of royal perfumes and the weight of whispered secrets. The queens of the Hellenistic world wielded more than crowns. They shaped empires through shadows, smiles, and strategic silence. You pause, breathing in the cool night air tinged with salt from the nearby sea. Somewhere in these marble corridors, Cleopatra III's plans continue to unfold, delicate and deadly as a spider's web. And you, traveler of time and whispers, continue to follow the footsteps of queens who ruled like gods, fierce, fragile, and unforgettable. You tread softly into a chamber thick with tension, where sisterly bonds stretch taut as bowstrings. Here, royal rivalry simmers beneath layers of silk and smiles, where sisters sharpen whispers into weapons and public smiles mask private vendettas. This is the court of the Ptolemies family, where sibling love often dances. Dangerously close to betrayal, you find yourself watching Cleopatra II and Cleopatra III from the shadows, two queens whose lives intertwine with both affection and rivalry. They share blood, throne, and, quite possibly, a drawer full of poison vials. You catch the faint scent of jasmine against sweet, but with an undercurrent of something sharper, like crushed mint or an unsaid threat. Sisters in name and in ambition. They compete for influence over their sons, for the favor of courtiers, and ultimately, for control over Egypt itself. Imagine whispered conversations behind closed doors, veiled insults masked as compliments, and the quiet clinking of wine cups in late-night chambers where no witnesses dare linger. Mainstream fact. It was not uncommon in the Ptolemaic dynasty for royal siblings to marry, but these unions often bred deep resentment and fierce rivalry. Relationships as volatile as the desert sun, you sense the delicate balance maintained by public ceremonies, where the two queens appear side by side, projecting unity while each plots to outmaneuver the other in private. You overhear servants gossiping about a rumored poisoning attempt, though details are lost to history and speculation. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient accounts mention a bizarre ritual where sisters would exchange symbolic gifts like an ornate dagger or a serpent-shaped bracelet as veiled warnings or declarations of dominance. You can almost see Cleopatra II slipping a snake-shaped ring into Cleopatra III's palm with a smile, both warm and cold. Historians still argue whether these rivalries weakened the dynasty or inadvertently kept it stable by preventing any single faction from gaining overwhelming power. Either way, you feel the electric tension crackling between these powerful women. You wander through the palace gardens, where statues of Isis and Hathor watch silently as queens maneuver in a deadly dance of loyalty and betrayal. The soft rustle of papyrus leaves and the distant call of a nightbird add an eerie soundtrack to the unfolding drama. You remember earlier tales of Arsinoe II's cunning and Cleopatra III's political savvy, and now see how these sister rivalries thread through generations, weaving a tapestry of power, both beautiful and deadly. As the moon dips low, you step back into the cool shadows, leaving behind the whispered promises and hidden daggers. The game of queens is far from over, and the stakes remain as high as ever crowns kingdoms, and legacies hanging in delicate balance. You breathe deeply, the scent of night jasmine lingering on your skin, and follow the echoes of footsteps fading into the labyrinthine palace corridors. You sail across shimmering Mediterranean waters under a sky so vast it feels like the whole universe is holding its breath. Salt tangs your lips as the cool night breeze tousles your hair, carrying whispers of distant lands and stories carried by waves. Your ship rocks gently, creaking timbers humming a lullaby for restless souls like you. This is no ordinary voyage. You're following Cleopatra Selene, daughter of the last great Egyptian queen, Cleopatra VII, and the Roman general, Mark Antonia, princess born into legends and betrayals, destined to carve her own story far from the Nile's golden sands, Cleopatra. Selena's journey begins in Rome, where as a child she was paraded through the city streets as a captive, a living trophy of Rome's conquest of Egypt. But she is far from broken. You watch her grow taught in Roman schools, fluent in Greek and Latin. A princess in exile yet fiercely proud of her dual heritage. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra Selene ever truly embraced Roman life or secretly longed to reclaim her mother's throne. Either way, her fate would take her westward to Mauritania, the land of Berber kings, olive groves, and rugged coastlines. You picture her arriving in the court of King Juba II, a learned man as fascinated by Greek poetry as he is by desert winds. Together, they forge an alliance of intellect and power, a blending of cultures far from Alexandria's marble palace's quirky tidbit. Cleopatra Selene reportedly introduced Egyptian religious practices to Mauritania, founding temples dedicated to Isis and Serapis, weaving her mother's gods into the fabric of a new kingdom thousands of miles from home. You follow her through sun-dappled gardens where fragrant orange blossoms mingle with the dry scent of desert sage. The court buzzes with philosophers, poets, and traders, each drawn to a queen who carries the legacy of Egypt's last dynasty in her regal bearing and quiet determination. Her rule brings stability and cultural flourishing to Mauritania, blending Egyptian, Greek, and Berber traditions into a unique tapestry. You overhear debates among scholars about how much power she wielded versus her husband, but her coinage and inscriptions bear her name in equal measure. As night falls, you stand on the palace balcony overlooking the Atlantic's restless waves. The stars above mirror the stories in your mind, legends of lost kingdoms, fierce queens, and the tides of history that shape and erase. You breathe in the salty air, feeling the weight of exile and hope mingling in the cool breeze. Cleopatra Selena's story is one of survival, adaptation, and quiet power far from the Nile's familiar banks. You watch as lanterns flicker in the distance, soft golden dots against the dark horizon, and imagine her thoughts. Does she dream of Alexandria's lost glory, or does she embrace the wild freedom of these new lands? You settle into the gentle rocking of the ship once more, the ocean's lullaby coaxing your eyelids closed. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a queen rules not with swords or scrolls, but with resilience born of blood and destiny. And you, traveler, drift with her into the night. You step quietly into the sun-baked courts of North Africa, where dusty winds swirl around towering palms and ancient stone ruins whisper forgotten tales. The air tastes faintly of spices and heat, cumin, coriander, and something wild you can't quite name. This is a land where queens ruled with fierce grace, balancing power between desert tribes and the encroaching might of Rome. Here, in Mauritania and Numidia, you find women who wielded crowns not just inherited but earned through battle, diplomacy, and careful alliances. These are queens of the African kingdoms who lived at the crossroads of Mediterranean and Saharan cultures. Their stories often overshadowed but no less vital. You imagine Queen Dia, known as the warrior queen or Kahina, leading her people against Arab invaders with a fiery spirit and unyielding resolve. Her name ripples through the desert like a storm, less a whisper now and more a roar. Historians still argue whether she was a mythologized figure or a real leader whose legacy was carved in sand and blood. In these courts, you sense a delicate dance between tradition and change, between honoring ancient gods and confronting new religions and powers. You breathe in the scent of burning incense at temples dedicated to Amun and Baal, mingling with the chants of priests who call for protection over their kingdoms. Quirky tidbit. Some local legends say that these queens kept secret gardens where rare desert roses bloomed, plants said to possess healing properties, so potent that their essence was guarded as jealously as royal treasures. You wander through bustling markets, filled with traders from across the Mediterranean, Berbers bartering olives and leather, Greeks selling fine pottery, Romans in togas buying exotic spices. You overhear talks of treaties forged over shared cups of sweet mint tea, alliances sealed not just by blood but by words and trust. Amid the court's political chess game, these queens balanced tradition and innovation. They adopted Hellenistic customs while fiercely preserving their native heritage, wearing Greek-style robes one day and tribal regalia the next, embodying two worlds at once. You watch as a queen addresses her council beneath the shade of date palms, her voice steady and commanding despite the heat. She is a strategist, a mother, a warrior, her strength measured not just in armies but in the loyalty she inspires. Historians still debate how much influence these African queens exerted over the broader Mediterranean politics, but their cultural legacy is undeniable. Through art, religion, and governance, they shaped a unique identity that resonates through time as the sun sets. Casting long shadows over ancient stone walls, you feel the pulse of a kingdom alive with stories of queens who ruled not just with crowns but with hearts intertwined with the desert's endless horizon. You breathe deeply, letting the desert night enfold you in its quiet embrace. The stars above like scattered jewels guiding the path of these forgotten rulers, and with the cool wind at your back, you continue on following the subtle footprints of queens whose power blossomed like desert flowers in the harshest of lands. You find yourself amid the bustling streets of ancient Antioch, where the scents of roasted lamb and fresh figs mingle with the sharp tang of sea salt carried from the nearby Mediterranean. Here, in the heart of the Seleucid Empire sprawling realm carved from Alexander's fading dream of different kind of queen steps into the light. A woman whose rule blends Greek philosophy with fiery determination. Meet Apama, wife of Seleucus I, one of Alexander's generals and the founder of this kingdom. Though her story is quieter, it is no less compelling. You picture her seated in a shaded courtyard, draped in silks dyed the deep blues of the night sky, surrounded by philosophers and advisors debating the nature of power and destiny. Her voice is soft but carries the weight of authority, shaping decisions that ripple across lands from the Taurus Mountains to the Indus River. Mainstream fact: Apama's marriage to Seleucus was part of Alexander's grand plan to unify cultures through dynastic strategic alliance blending Persian and Macedonian bloodlines to legitimize rule over diverse peoples. You catch the scent of jasmine tea as you watch Apama quietly influence court affairs, her wisdom reflected in the serene smile she wears during public ceremonies. Yet, behind her calm exterior lies a mind that navigates political storms with deft precision. Quirky tidbit: Some tales suggest that Apoma enjoyed hosting extravagant banquets featuring exotic dishes like roasted peacock and honey-glazed dates, not just for delight but as subtle displays of wealth and cultural fusion that impressed visiting dignitaries. Historians still argue how much formal power Apoma held versus her role as a beloved consort and cultural bridge. Was she merely a figurehead, or an influential advisor, shaping the Seleucid legacy? The evidence is tantalizing but incomplete, leaving her an enigmatic figure woven into the empire's complex tapestry. As twilight deepens, you hear the soft echoes of lyres and laughter drifting from palace gardens, where Hellenistic and Persian traditions mingle like the mingled scents of olive oil and sandalwood. Apoma's presence feels like a quiet current beneath the empire's grand narrative. Reminder that queens wielded influence not only through armies but through culture, diplomacy, and subtle grace. You breathe in the cooling air, feeling the pulse of a kingdom where East meets West, tradition meets innovation, and power is as much about wisdom as it is about force. You turn away from the palace walls, the distant call to prayer mingling with a Greek chorus in your ears, and continue your journey through the forgotten queens who ruled like pharaohs. Each story, a delicate thread in history's vast tapestry. You wander into the cool, shadowed halls of Pergamon, where the scent of wild herbs lingers and the stone walls echo with whispered debates between philosophers and politicians. This city, perched on a rugged hill overlooking the Aegean Sea, is home to a queen whose story twists through politics and poetry. Alcleiotis, a woman whose name lingers in history, not just as a royal consort, but as a player in the great power struggles of the Hellenistic world. You find her seated in a sunlit atrium, draped in robes of deep purple and gold, her gaze steady as she listens to ambassadors from Rome, Egypt, and the Seleucid Empire. Her voice, when she speaks, commands attention not because she shouts, but because she carefully weighs every word like a finely balanced scale. Mainstream fact: Laodice, I was the wife of King Antiochus II, and the mother of Seleucus II, playing a pivotal role in the infamous Laodicean War, a dynastic conflict that shook the Seleucid Empire to its core. You catch a faint scent of lilacs and cedarwood as you watch Laodice orchestrate political alliances with deft skill, often using marriage as a diplomatic tool to secure her family's hold on power. Her life was a chess game of shifting loyalties, where every move counted and every smile might hide a dagger. Quirky tidbit: ancient sources hint that Laodice had a fondness for riddles and puzzles, often challenging visiting dignitaries to solve them as a test of wit before entering her audience chamber, a sort of ancient gatekeeper. Ritual blending intellect with power. Historians still debate whether Laodice was a ruthless manipulator or a savvy protector of her family's legacy. Her role in the war that followed her husband's death is shrouded in mystery, with some suggesting she even orchestrated poisoning plots to eliminate rivals. You imagine her walking through the palace gardens, the rustle of olive branches accompanying her contemplative steps. The tension between Greek traditions and local cultures plays out not only in politics, but in the delicate art of governing a diverse empire. As dusk settles, you feel the quiet strength radiating from Laodicean, enduring reminder that queens wielded power in many forms, through words, wisdom, and the subtle crafting of destiny. You exhale slowly, the scent of lilacs still lingering as you continue your journey through time. following the footsteps of queens whose reigns were written in both shadow and light. You find yourself walking through the marble colonnades of the ancient city of Rhodes, the salty sea breeze carrying the distant sound of merchants bartering and fishermen hauling their catch. This bustling Hellenistic port city was home to a queen whose name might not echo as loudly as others, but whose influence shaped the delicate balance between sea power and diplomacy. Queen Chryses. Imagine her seated on a marble throne carved with dolphins and waves, her robes shimmering like the water beneath the harbor's surface. She's a strategist who understands that control of the seas can make or break an empire. Her reign is marked by careful alliances, naval strength, and an uncanny ability to navigate the treacherous waters of both politics and literal Mediterranean tides. Mainstream fact: Rhodes was a powerful maritime city-state during the Hellenistic era, famous for its naval fleet and the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Though Chryses isn't widely documented, her role as queen consort or regent involved maintaining the city's naval dominance. Quirky tidbits: legends say Chryses had a pet dolphin that would accompany her on morning swims along the harbor, a symbol of her deep connection to the sea and her subjects. Prosperity: historians still argue about the extent of her political power. Was she a mere figurehead or a shrewd leader steering Rhodes through turbulent times? The lack of records leaves much to speculation, but the city's survival and prosperity suggest leadership that was both pragmatic and visionary. You picture Chryses negotiating trade agreements with merchants from Egypt, Carthage, and even distant India, her voice calm but firm as she ensures Rhodes remains a crucial hub of commerce and culture. The scent of olive oil and freshly baked bread fills the air, mingling with salt and seaweed. As night falls, lanterns flicker along the stone docks, casting dancing shadows on the water's surface. You imagine the queen standing at the harbor's edge, gazing out over the waves, her mind weaving strategies as fluid and powerful as the sea itself. You take a deep breath, the cool night air soothing your senses as you continue your journey. The subtle currents of history, where queens like Chryses ruled not with swords, but with wisdom and grace. You drift into the sun-drenched courts of Ptolemaic Egypt once more, where the scent of papyrus and freshly ground spices lingers in the air. Here, the tale of Bernice II unfolds, a queen whose story is stitched with ambition, love, and celestial intrigue. Imagine her seated beneath a canopy embroidered with stars, her gaze fixed on the night sky as if she's negotiating not just with earthly powers, but with the cosmos itself. Bernice II was no ordinary queen. She inherited the throne of Cyrene, a wealthy Greek city in North Africa, before marrying Ptolemy III, becoming co-ruler of Egypt. Her reign is a blend of political savvy and personal drama, marked by a fierce dedication to her kingdom and a famous story that reached beyond the earth. Literally, mainstream fact: Bernice II is credited with the Lock of Bernice, a tale where she vowed to sacrifice her hair to the gods for her husband's safe return from war. The lock was said to have been placed in the sky as a constellation, a symbolic gesture blending devotion and political theater. Quirky tidbit: ancient poets celebrated Bernice II as a patron of the arts and sciences, with some suggesting she played a role in the commissioning of the Library of Alexandria's treasures. Her love for astronomy inspired scholars who mapped the heavens in new ways. Historians still debate how much direct power Bernice wielded versus acting alongside her husband, but evidence suggests she was a formidable presence ruling territories, commanding armies, and influencing court politics with a deft touch. You picture her walking through Alexandria's grand halls, her fingers tracing the scrolls and star charts, her mind as sharp as any philosopher's. The faint scent of lotus and myrrh follows her, mingling with the murmur of scribes, copying texts, and astronomers calculating the movements of planets as dusk settles. You watch Bernice stand by the harbor, gazing at the constellation named for her lock of hair. It shimmers above like a cosmic crown, a reminder that queens ruled not only over lands, but over stories and stars. You breathe deeply, the night air cool against your skin, and continue following the delicate threads of history, queens whose power was as much celestial as it was terrestrial. You find yourself wandering the bustling streets of Alexandria, where scholars and traders mingle beneath towering columns and intricate mosaics. The scent of freshly baked bread mingles with ink and parchment as the city hums with the quiet energy of discovery and ambition. Here, amidst this vibrant tapestry, you meet Arsène IV, clever, defiant, and famously underestimated. Arsène IV's story is steeped in drama, sibling rivalry, and a desperate bid for power. She was the younger sister of Cleopatra VII, caught in the deadly whirlpool of dynastic strife. While Cleopatra VII charmed Rome, Arsène plotted in Alexandria, determined to carve her own path amid the crumbling Ptolemaic kingdom. Historians still argue about Arsène's true ambitions. Was she a ruthless usurper or a princess forced into rebellion by the tides of fate? Either way, her brief reign was marked by audacity and cunning. You picture her rallying troops within the city's walls, the clatter of sandals on stone echoing as she commands with fiery resolve. The smell of burning olive oil lamps fills the air, mingling with tension and anticipation. Quirky tidbit: some accounts suggest Arsène employed war elephants in battle, majestic beasts that stomped through the streets, turning the tide in her favor and terrifying her enemies. Mainstream fact: Arsène IV was eventually captured by Julius Caesar and exiled to the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, where she met a mysterious end, her fate shrouded in whispers and legend. You watch as she gazes out over the Mediterranean, the sun setting behind her, casting long shadows over a city at the brink of transformation. Despite her downfall, Arsène's spirit lingers, an echo of fierce resistance in a world dominated by gods and kings. As night falls, the city quiets, but her story remains alive in the stones and stars, a reminder of the queens who dared to challenge fate and family alike. You inhale the salty breeze one last time, feeling the weight of history settle softly around you, and continue your journey through the whispered legacies of queens who ruled like pharaohs. You glide through the ancient temples and sunlit courtyards of Ephesus, where marble columns stretch toward the sky and the scent of wild herbs drifts on the warm breeze. This city, a jewel of the Hellenistic world, witnessed the final days of Arsène IV and the quiet strength of other forgotten queens whose stories are woven into its stones. Here, under the watchful eyes of Artemis, goddess of the hunt and protector of the city, you sense a solemn atmosphere, a place where power and fate intersect in silence. You imagine Arsenu IV confined within these walls, a captive queen whose spirit still flickers. Despite chains and exile, the echoes of her footsteps mingle with the whispers of temple priests and the soft murmur of visitors paying respects. You hear tales of her final days. Some say she died peacefully, others whisper of darker ends. Historians still debate the truth, caught between fragments of legend and scarce records. Quirky tidbit: local lore speaks of a secret passage beneath the temple where Arsenu's loyal followers attempted a daring rescue, an episode shrouded in mystery and forgotten by time. Mainstream fact: after her exile, Arsenu IV's political threat was neutralized, but her legacy persisted in the uneasy peace between Rome and Egypt. You stroll through the rose gardens surrounding the temple, the soft petals brushing your fingertips as you ponder the quiet resilience of queens whose power survived beyond their lifetimes in stories, symbols, and silent stones. As twilight fades into night, you feel a gentle calm settle over the city. The stars above twinkle softly, as if guarding secrets only they remember. You breathe deeply, the cool night air wrapping around you like a comforting shawl, and prepare to take your final steps through this tapestry of history where queens ruled like pharaohs, their legacies whispered on the wind. You drift back toward the bustling heart of Alexandria one last time, the city now quieter under the veil of night, lanterns casting golden pools of light on cobblestone streets. The scent of salt and spices lingers, mingling with the soft murmur of distant waves against the harbor. Here, you encounter Cleopatra VII, the queen whose name is etched deepest into history's stone and legend's song. Unlike the queens before her, Cleopatra VII's reign is painted with vivid strokes of ambition, romance, and tragedy. She strides boldly into Roman politics, speaking multiple languages, captivating the minds and hearts of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony alike. You imagine the sparkle of jewels against her skin, the weight of crown and expectation balanced by her fierce intelligence. Mainstream fact: Cleopatra VII was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, known for her diplomatic skill, political savvy, and tragic downfall, marking the end of both the dynasty and Hellenistic Egypt. Quirky tidbit: despite her regal image, Cleopatra was said to enjoy practical jokes, once filling a banquet hall with frogs to amuse and surprise her guests. A whimsical touch in a world of serious politics. Historians still debate how much her image was shaped by Roman propaganda versus her own ambition and leadership. Was she a seductress or a strategic mastermind? The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. You picture her standing on the balcony overlooking the Nile, the stars mirrored in the river's dark waters. The weight of empires presses upon her, yet she remains unbowed, resilient, proud, and endlessly fascinating as the night deepens. You breathe in the warm desert air, the sounds of the city fading into a soothing rhythm. Cleopatra VII's story closes this chapter, but opens the door to endless dreams of queens who ruled like pharaohs. Blending power and poetry, history and myth, you feel your eyelids grow heavy, the tapestry of tales wrapping around you like a soft blanket. The queen's whispers fade into a lullaby, carrying you gently toward rest. Now, as the stars twinkle softly overhead and the gentle night hums around you, let the stories you've heard tonight settle quietly in your mind. Imagine the soft glow of torchlight flickering across ancient walls, the distant murmur of the Nile, and the cool desert breeze brushing your skin. The queens who walked these lands so long ago moved with grace and strength, their voices carried forward through time like a whispered lullaby. Let their stories ease your thoughts, weaving calm and wonder as you drift toward sleep. Rest easy knowing these echoes of power and resilience have found a place in your dreams, soft and steady, like the river's endless flow. Good night, traveler, may your dreams be as rich and deep as the history you've journeyed through.